The big picture here is, well, it's relatively positive compared with last time around. I say compared with last time around and also compared with expectations, but there are a few little nuances that we'll get to in a second. These bars just show you what was expected last time. And this is gross domestic product. It's the rate at which the economy is growing, the rate at which we're all getting better off. And anything above the line, obviously, is positive. Anything below the line is negative. Look, that minus 1.4%, that was the recession that was forecast last time around. Let's see how those numbers change with the latest forecasts. Look, the red bars here, that's the latest forecast, OK? This is the key thing to look at to start off with, because obviously it was that question of whether there was going to be a recession. Well, now the Chancellor says there isn't a technical recession. What does that mean in practice? Well, a technical recession is 2 successive quarters where the economy is shrinking. In this case, well, look, the economy is basically down by 0.2%. It's not great by the scheme of things, but compared with last time around, it's certainly better. Better next year as well. But here's also something that's interesting. In the following years, so beyond the next election, the forecast is actually a little bit worse. Weaker growth in those periods there. How does that impact public finances? This is really important because that determines how much the Chancellor potentially has to spend versus his forecast and versus his rules. This is showing you public sector net borrowing. That's as a percent of GDP. These were the numbers that we jotted down during the actual speech itself. And as you can see, again, a bit less borrowing each of these years. So he's borrowing a little bit less. Why is that? In large part, it's because the economy is doing better. And when the economy does better, that means more in the way of tax revenues coming in, which means that he doesn't necessarily suffer as a result of that. He actually brings in cash and doesn't have to borrow as much as a result. But now let's get on to the actual policies that were announced today. Now, this is very big picture, ultimate big picture. There's something called the scorecard, which kind of tots up all of the different policies and gives a sense of whether that's money coming out of the exchequer, that's in negative terms, or coming into the exchequer, tax rises. And this is giveaways. It is largely giveaways. But here's, again, something striking. And we're totting things up here. So within that chunk there, you've got the full expenses, a big deal there for many businesses around the country. That's going to cost kind of getting towards £10 billion a year by 2024-25. But you've also got other things as well. You've got childcare, you've got those pensions plans as well, the changes to the pension plans, although they're mostly off towards the future. Full expensing, the big thing in the short run. But also note the shape of these bars again. For the next few years, you've got big giveaways coming up to 2025-26. And then they diminish. And that's largely because that expensing is a temporary thing. It's a really big deal, but it's currently a temporary thing. And it's not necessarily going to be in the future. And, of course, this is after the election. So you've got big question marks about what's going to happen after the election. Are any of those things going to be renewed in the next manifesto? But we'll bring you more detail on how the makeup of those bars in a second. Just one other thing to note. I do have hundreds of other charts, but I'm going to try and keep it relatively short this time around. Real household disposable income. This is perhaps the ultimate way of getting a sense of that kind of pound in your pocket impact of what we've been going through recently. Anything above the bar shows we're getting better off after you adjust for inflation, after you adjust for income, after you adjust for all of those different things. And this is last time around. Look at this. Right-hand side, those two bars are the lowest that they have ever been, OK? Last time around, OK? The red bars there. Now look at the red bars again, and we're going to bring on these latest updated numbers. So improved numbers. Look at the red bars. The fall is a little bit less, isn't it? Just over here. I'll go back just so you can see. Last time, pretty bad. This time, still pretty bad, but not necessarily quite as bad. And actually, that's still the worst 2 years in modern record. So going back, you can see it here. There have never been another 2 years, going back to the 1950s, where we've had as big a squeeze on our personal disposable incomes as we are going through in the next couple of years. So still very tough for many households around the country. But that's the interesting thing about this budget was these numbers are now finally starting to get better rather than getting worse. Of course, questions remain as to whether that's politically enough for the Conservative Party. And as I say, you saw the numbers there in the charts there when it came to the scorecard, when it came to growth, when it comes to public finances, big questions about how much of the pain is going to be felt after the next election and therefore raising a question about what comes in the manifesto.